السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So here we go again. I was busy in the last few days, so I'm sorry for being absent. I was busy with work, etc. We carry on with reading the story of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, and in the last time we have seen the introduction and the first part of the story, and today in this video we carry on with the story, so follow with me. One night in January, after a long journey, I arrived at the wood school. It was dark, and the weather was very cold, windy and rainy. The school was very large, but it was not warm and comfortable like Mrs. Reed's house. A teacher took me into a large room, and it was full of girls. There were about 80 girls there. The youngest girls were 9, and the eldest were about 20. They all wore ugly brown dresses. It was supper time. There was water to drink and a small piece of bread to eat. I was thirsty and drank some water. I could not eat anything because I felt too tired and too excited. After supper, all the girls went upstairs to bed. The teacher took me into a very long room. All the girls slept in this room. 2 girls had to sleep in each bed. Early in the morning, I woke up. It was still dark outside, and the room was very cold. The girls washed themselves in cold water and put on their brown dresses. Then everybody went downstairs, and the early morning lessons began. At last, it was time for breakfast. I was now very hungry. We went into the dining room with the teachers. There was a terrible smell of burning food. We were all hungry, but when we tasted the food, we couldn't eat it. It tasted terrible. Feeling very hungry, we all left the dining room. At 9 o'clock, lessons began again. I looked around at the other girls. They looked very strange in their ugly brown dresses. I did not like the teachers. They seemed to be unkind and unfriendly. Then, at 12 o'clock, the head teacher, Miss Temple, came in. She was very pretty, and her face was kind. "I want to speak to all the girls," she said. "I know that you couldn't eat your breakfast this morning," she told us. "So now you will have some bread and cheese and a cup of coffee." The other teachers looked surprised. "I will pay for this meal," Miss Temple said. The girls were very pleased. After this meal, we went out into the garden. The girls' brown dresses were too thin for the cold winter. Most of the girls looked cold and unhappy, and some of them looked very ill. I walked around and looked at the girls and at the school and the garden, but I did not speak to anyone, and nobody spoke to me. One of the girls was reading a book. "Is your book interesting?" I asked her. "I like it," she answered. "Does this school belong to Miss Temple?" I asked. "No, it doesn't," she answered. "It belongs to Mr. Brocklehurst. He buys all our food and all our clothes." The girl's name was Helen Burns. She was older than I was. I liked her immediately. She became my friend. Helen told me that many of the girls were ill because they were always cold and hungry. Mr. Brocklehurst was not a kind man. The clothes he bought for the girls were not warm enough for the winter, and there was never enough food to eat. After a few months, many of the girls at Louis' school became seriously ill. Lessons stopped, and I and the other girls who were not ill spent all our time out in the fields near the school. The weather was now warm and sunny. It was a happy time for us. But my friend Helen Burns was not with us. She had to stay in bed. She was very ill. One evening, I went to Miss Temple's room. Helen Burns was laying there in a little bed. She was now very thin, and her face was white. She spoke to me in a low voice. "Jane," she said, "it's good to see you. I want to say goodbye to you." "Why?" I asked her. "Are you going away?" "Yes, I am," Helen answered. "I am going far away." That night, she died. During that summer, many other girls in the school died too. Mr. Brocklehurst sold the school. It became a happier place. I stayed at the school until I was 18, and then I had to find a job. I wanted to become a teacher. I wrote a letter to a newspaper. I said I was a young teacher who wanted a job working in a family. Then I waited for an answer. At last, an answer came. It was from a lady, Mrs. Fairfax, who lived at a place called Thornfield Hall. She needed a teacher for a little girl. So I packed my clothes in a small bag and traveled to Thornfield Hall.